Welcome everybody. Today I want to talk about this. Vacuum tubes. Why? Because we all love tube amps. I actually love them a little too much. I own a lot of tube amps. That's my weak spot. Yeah, and that's my biggest first world problem, so to say. But what I want to find out today is how important are the actual tubes. And you can win a full set of tubes, preamp tubes and power amp tubes for your amp. I will let you know what you have to do later in this video. We all know iconic tubes like the EL34 or the 6L6. And we all have a certain tone in mind when we hear those names, right? So when you hear EL34, you think about what? Marshall, right? Those in-your-face mids that only Marshall can give you. When you hear 6L6, what is it? Fat clean tones from Fender amps? Or the roaring low end and all the grind of those modern metal machines like a 5150 or a dual rectifier? That's what I have in mind. But is it actually the tube? Or is it the overall design of the amp? I know that a tube is not gonna make a night and day difference, and I'm pretty sure you know that too. But today we want to find out how much of the sound is being changed if we just change the tube. And we're gonna do some really cool experiments both with high gain and low gain tones. And I want to be as scientific as possible, at least by YouTube standards. And that means we want to make sure the only component in the signal chain that we change is the tube, okay? The rest stays the same. That means I'm not playing today, we're reamping because we want to have the exact same take, no difference between the takes. We want to have the same amp, the same cables, the same cabinet, the same microphones in the same mic positions, and also the rest of the gear should be the same. I even took care of the tubes themselves, so they had the same time to warm up before I recorded and reamped the take. So I'm being pretty nerdy about this, and with this setup we can actually find out what's happening and if tubes are important or not. Like I said, I have different sets of tubes, and we're gonna do the tests with a Mesa dual rectifier and with a Boogie 1960. We're gonna do the high gain tone with this one, and then we're gonna use the Boogie, which has this inbuilt Infinium technology. So they say you can just throw any tube into that amp and it's gonna work, even combinations of different types of tubes. So let's see if that works or not. Here's the exact setup for the Mesa Boogie amp. We're playing the amp in the high gain channel, in the modern high gain channel. We're also playing a Mesa Boogie cab, 4x12 rectifier cab. There are two microphones there, a Shure SM57, the standard mic for metal these days, and we have an SE Electronic RNT Rupert Neve tube microphone. They are at the same level mixed together, and the tube microphone is making the 57 a little fuller, adding a little more balls, You like balls? I like balls. So that's the reason for the second mic. And it sounds like this. So that is the typical sound of the rectifier, right? Very scooped, very aggressive distortion, fat low end, pretty dynamic in the lows, not that compressed, and a lot of upper mid bite. And the rectifier usually comes with 6L6 tubes. So the first thing we're gonna do is we will take them out and replace them with EL34s and see what that does. And by the way, now it's time to grab some decent headphones or some good sounding loudspeakers, because this is about details. You don't want to listen on your phone or on some cheap headphones. So all the tubes we're using today are the TAD Tube Amp Doctor Premium selected tubes. And we start with the 6L6 tubes in the rectifier. Enjoy! That sounds like expected. A classic brutal rectifier tone. Lovely. But here comes the next tube. This is an EL34. Could you hear the difference? It's pretty close, I know. And maybe closer than you expected? I don't know. But there is a difference. And it is a difference that matters. I would describe the difference like this. The 6L6 sounds more aggressive, more brutal. It has more higher mid-bite, more rattling highs. The EL34 sounds warmer, less highs, less higher mids, and more lower mids, a more vocal mid-range. It sounds a little fuller and darker. So maybe better for something melodic, but now I want you to listen again. So concentrate on the high end when I switch between those two, and concentrate on the fullness in the lower mids. Here we go. Could you hear it now? I bet you could hear it now. I think the difference is small but important. You know, it depends on what you want. If you want to sound extremely brutal and just play low-tuned death metal riffs, it might be cooler to play the 6L6. If you also do more melodic stuff and need a more vocal mid-range, if you play a lot of leads and solos, I would go for the EL34. Personally, I was surprised, so I'm gonna try to use the EL34 on my next reamping sessions because I like the fullness. Let's move on to the next tube, and this is the 5881, which is a close relative to the 6L6. And just like expected, the difference is even smaller. But what I can hear, and this time I will tell you before you listen, is that this tube even gives us even more highs and more high-end rattle. So if you need more bite, if you need more aggression, even more than the 6L6, this tube might be for you. Have a listen. So the difference might be subtle, but it's important, especially in the studio. And changing tubes gives you tonal options, depending on what you want to do, depending on your taste, and depending on what kind of music you play. So, like I said, more aggression, 6L6. More warmth, EL34. It's still, like all those tubes still maintain the character of the amp. Don't worry. The design of the amp is more important than the tube itself. A lot more important. A rectifier is going to sound like a rectifier, but you can tweak it a little bit into the direction you want to go. Let's do another experiment. Let's fucking crank the power amp of the rectifier. Not fully, but let's make it really, really freaking loud. And the reason is I want to know if the difference between the tubes becomes more audible when we do that. I don't like a cranked power amp for metal rhythm tones because we take all our distortion from the preamp and we want to have a tight low end. And the more you crank the power amp, the more distorted the low end gets, the more compressed it gets, the more flubby it sounds, and the less definition you have. So for metal, it's usually not a cool thing. And for some reasons, the mids get louder and louder and the highs and lows get more quiet. But since the rectifier is a pretty scooped amp, it might be cool. Let's check out 6L6 normal volume versus cranked. Wow, that's a huge difference, right? Huge difference. Just like I said, everything is more compressed, less dynamic, kind of saturated, and the mids really jump at you. It's a little too much for me here, but it's interesting. You can actually shape the sound of your guitar amp by cranking the output of the power amp. But now let's compare the cranked version of the 6L6 and the EL34. Yeah, well, the effect of cranking the amp itself does a lot more to the sound than changing the tubes here. It was a nice experiment, but I think the difference between the tubes, at least with this amp, is the same, no matter if you crank it or not. Just for the record, I also tried another tube from the 6L6 family, which is the KT66, which is, by the way, the coolest looking of the bunch. Really, like, big boy, you know? And I think this one is the British answer or version of the 6L6, if I'm not mistaken. And yeah, it again sounded slightly different, but not different enough to be shown in this video. Let me sum it up. High gain experiment done. So the difference between EL34 and 6L6 is pretty obvious. The difference in between the different tubes of the 6L6 family, KT66, M881 and 6L6 itself, is not that huge. It's not that huge. Overall, the 6L6 family sounds a little colder, more aggressive, tighter low end, less mids, and the EL34 sound warmer and fuller in the mids, slightly darker, and also with a slightly looser low end. Let's move on to the next amp. So this is the Bugera 1960, and this is a Marshall Plexi copy, super lead copy, and it's actually a great sounding amp. It's incredible for the money. Believe me, it's incredible. It sounds great. I use it a lot on bass and on guitar. And a lot of the distortion comes from the power tube, so this will be interesting. We will start with the EL34 because that's the stock tubes in this amp. Of course, we take the Tube Amp Doctor version and let's see what happens. Here we go. So let's use the 6L6 instead. Let's see what happens. That sounds pretty similar to the rectifier experiment, right? So have a listen to the clanky highs one more time, and you can see that the 6L6 make the amp sound colder and more aggressive, which can be a cool thing. And the EL34 again sound a little warmer and fuller, but less in your face and less aggressive. Have another listen. And the more I listen to this, I can hear that some of the mids are shifted. It's very complex and hard to describe, but it's interesting. And the character really changes overall from more aggressive to warmer. Once again, now it depends on what you want. So these days, I'm only using those Tube Amp Doctor premium selected tubes. I proudly endorse them because they're the best. Period. They're the best. They're perfectly selected, they sound great, and they seem to last forever. Great tubes. So if you need new tubes, don't go anywhere else. In Europe, you can get them at their shop, tubeampdoctor.de, but also in the States, I think it's Humbucker Music and something else, you can get them there. They also have like packs for your amps. So if you have a Dietzel amp or a Blackstar amp or a Marshall amp, you can buy different kind of packs where you get all the tubes. And in some of your favorite boutique amps, there might be Tube Amp Doctor tubes. Just look at this. All these amp manufacturers use Tube Amp Doctor tubes for their high-end amps. So, yeah, this is cool stuff. And if you play a Mesa Boogie amp like this one, it's even easier, because Mesa Boogie, they have those color codes like green and white and red and something. And they can, a Tube Amp Doctor, they can translate that into their tube language, so you can get sets of tubes there without needing a technician to rebias your amp, which is something very, very, very cool. So if you want to win a full package of tubes for your amp, both the preamp tubes and the power amp tubes, this is what you have to do. Two things. First of all, you subscribe to my email list. You will find a link below where you can sell your soul to the devil. That's me. It's pretty idiot-proof. You just follow the link. It will guide you through that process of getting rid of your soul. And once you've done that, you will make a beautiful photo of you and your amp, and you send it to me to this email address, to iwanttubes@kohlekeller.de. All right? But what you have to understand, I might show those photos in another video, so at least wear some underwear, okay? I know tube amps are sexy, but don't go too far, please. But I appreciate some funny photos, all right? Okay, you know what to do. Subscribe to my email list and send me a nice love letter and a photo of you and your amp. So one of you get a full tube package for whatever amp you play. Awesome. So let me sum it up. Changing your power tubes, that's not a night and day difference. Not at all. It's still very important because it gives you tonal options to shape your sound into the right direction. You just need to know what you want. You want to be brighter or darker, where do you want to go? Don't buy new gear, don't buy a pedal, don't buy an equalizer or something before you haven't checked which tubes help you, okay? And make sure you buy some high quality tubes because they will last long and they will sound great. I recommend the stuff from Tube Amp Doctor. You buy whatever you want, but that's my recommendation. Let's continue with some extremely nerdy A/B comparisons where I show you all the different tubes I've tested, even more than I've spoken about. So that will be a really cool nerd fest for you now. What you have to do is you should subscribe to this channel. That would be nice. And ring the bell, ding dong, so you don't miss my videos. Subscribe to my email list. You'll find a link down there. And what else? Yeah, sell your soul to the devil. That's what my email list is. It's really cool. Here are my socials if you want to stay in touch with me. And yeah, make some comments. Let me know what you want me to do. Let me know what you think about this video. How important are tubes to you? I don't know. Are you all digital? Are you a tube freak? Let me know. That's all for today. Thanks for watching. I love you all. See you in hell, motherfuckers. Bye-bye.